Welcome. I'm Barbara Levin, your host, and this is PhotoTalk. Sponsored by Professional Women Photographers, better known as PWP, PhotoTalk was created specifically to explore the roles, history, perspectives, and accomplishments of women in today's world of photography. Tonight, our guest is fine art photographer Keisha Scarville. Keisha is a Brooklyn native and graduate of the Rochester Institute of Technology in Rochester, New York. Her work has been exhibited at the Brooklyn Museum of Art, Hunter College, and the Latin Art Collector Gallery. She's included in major public and private collections such as the Smithsonian American Art Museum and the Center for Photography at Woodstock. In addition, her work has been published in Camera Arts Magazine, Time, Vibe, Nylon, and the New York Times. Currently, Keisha is a faculty member at the International Center of Photography in New York City. Keisha, thank you for joining us on PhotoTalk.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
In your work, you weave together themes dealing with memory and transformation, often photographing your family along with everyday objects in a very conceptual and poetic way. Tell us a little bit about how and why you got into the field of photography.
I first got into photography when I was actually in high school. I was quite young. I wanted to be a writer. I was actually sowing seeds of wanting to become a print journalist. And that was really my concentration when I was in high school. I just wanted to write. And I remember they told me that I had to take some kind of art credit or art elective in order to graduate, and the only thing that was available was photography. And I decided to do it, and it was amazing in terms of, I remember the very first picture that my very first roll of film, very first picture I printed in a dark room.
What was that?
It was actually a man walking with an umbrella down the street.
Okay.
And, you know, it was something where I saw this moment and I could extract it and keep that moment forever. There was something about being able to distill that moment that just spoke to me. It was like magic. It was something that I saw. It was my perspective. It was my point of view. So there was something about that always spoke to me. I kept taking photography classes and decided that this was what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. I wanted to have moments like that.
Did that more or less inform your choice then of photographing your family?
Absolutely. You know, I think that always wanting to connect with this particular moment is something that's always spoke to me. And there's something about that still, that just taking that moment out of the continuum of time, what was happening at that particular time. There's something about creating that moment and capturing it.
And preserving it.
And preserving it, yeah.
For as long as possible.
Yeah.
Before we look at your pictures, just because I know they're in a square format, so tell me a little bit what camera techniques you use.
Whatever is available, you know, in terms of what I use.
And
like if I have my
do black and white or color. Is it digital?
So I started off doing a lot more film, using like a twin lens reflex was kind of my main camera. I think nowadays whatever I have on me, like I'll take my camera phone out, whatever. But I shoot mostly digital now.
And it's the digital age.
Yeah, it is.
We're all doing it.
It is, and still loving and exploring and expressing myself through black and white. There's still some color, but it's mainly black and white, where I'm using my digital SLR camera and later converting the files into black and white.
Black and white. Okay, so let's look at some pictures now. Where was this taken?
So this was from a series entitled Many Waters. My immediate family is here in America, but I'm first generation American. And my whole family is from Guyana, South America. So I was able to take a trip with my mom back a few years ago, and I was able to capture my family. And so this is my cousin. actually, and she's running along. There's something called a seawall, because where my grandfather's house, where I was staying, is below sea level. So I just, just watching her run, there was something about the way her body ran across the seawall that just really spoke to me.
Right, it definitely captures that moment of joy or freedom or something. Okay, let's look at some more.
It's just something that's right outside the house where my mom and I stayed. We stayed with my family at my grandfather's house. So this was part of a larger story that dealt with water and rain, but also my cousin, who we saw in the previous picture. When I took that picture, she was running, and then suddenly I couldn't find her. She disappeared. I thought she drowned or something had happened to her, so I jumped into the water, and I was completely soaked, and so she was fine. She didn't disappear. She wasn't in the water, but yeah, I took that picture just to kind of capture that moment. Those were my clothes after they got wet.
Oh, so you were drying the clothes, so
Yeah.
that becomes the moment of memory transformed into everyday objects that will evoke that whole experience.
Yeah, so it's also about what the object represents, or the moment that the object represented.
Kind of evidence. This one, is that a picture of your mother?
That's my mom. Yeah, that's my mom. And for every image, the image speaks to something else. And around this time, my mother and I and my aunt were all having dreams about my grandmother, who had passed away by this time. And so I wanted to capture an image that just represented what was happening in our dreams, and just the beauty of being visited by the spirit of my grandmother, or just her presence in our lives. So that's where that picture came from.
Do you feel that being a woman and this being your family, that becomes really important and gives you an edge in photographing these kinds of subjects?
I would say yes. I think that my position in my family, I'm the youngest daughter. How
many daughters are there?
There are, I don't even know. Between me and my brother, it's just two of us between my parents. There's a lot of women in my family, and with all these women, there's been a lot of stories that have been passed down.
So there's a lot of female bonding going on. Okay.
And I think I kind of, using photography, took the charge of creating this archive, and wanting to create an archive of who everyone is in my family, and the complexity of familial relationships, but also to honor the individuality of all these amazing, strong people who I call family.
Because family is very important to you, and the representation of it. This was your mother as well?
This is my mom as well.
It's beautifully composed, so the legs are just so suggestive, and yet there's not a lot of information in the picture, so the viewer has to go into it and take from it what they feel as well.
Well, I try to, with a lot of my images, not necessarily be too literal, and I try to keep some level of mystery, or also a sense of it being more of an open-ended narrative. That there's more underneath the surface.
When you say narrative and there's more, what do you mean? Are you talking about the female experience, the immigrant experience, the island experience? What do you mean by that? What narrative are you talking about?
For the Many Waters project, I think it was more so those things that I think are unsaid between family members, but also the beauty of the present moment as well. So there's I think that for me, with that particular project, looking at the poetry and beauty of where we are in the present moment and who we are to each other, but also, those things that are unsaid, and those things that you have to look deeper in order to understand. You know, that's.
And I think that's the job of the viewer more than the photographer to find that. And I think you do that really well. Let's move to some other photos. Okay, that one, you use yourself as a subject as well.
I do. I do. And this image is my cousin's. This is also part of the Many Waters project, and here my cousin's actually getting her hair straightened, and you know, it's just, for me, I think being a young woman, or just kind of understanding that experience and just going through that experience, that moment just became even more poignant for me and even more necessary for me to capture, or just became something that I really wanted to focus on with using my camera. So there are certain moments that I think that I do focus on and have meaning for me because I'm a woman.
Do you pick those moments, or do you find them? Are you out photographing and you say, oh, that's it? Or do you have kind of a pre-visualization of what you might want to photograph?
I think that I would say most times it's finding. It's definitely finding. And there's something about, you know, those moments being revealed to me that I enjoy, that it's not something that I'm necessarily setting up. And there are projects where I have done that, but there is something about, you know, the small surprises that
happen every day, right? And that's why you need to carry your camera with you always. So okay, so moving on to the next one.
So this is also from the Many Waters project, and these are wet footsteps on my my grandfather's steps. And again, you know, it's just the remnants of what's left behind. And for me, this was, you know, not seeing the person, but seeing their presence in that situation.
And that one too, that looked more like a scene from out of a window, was it?
It's actually sitting on my grandfather's porch, and you know, it was just a glass of water that had been left.
And who was that?
This is another one of my cousins. He was just delighting in his shadow on the water, and you know, again, it was just the beauty of that moment and the delight that he had in something as simple as, you know, his own shadow. That just really struck me. Well,
that's what I find also very remarkable about your work, is that you take one or two elements and compose it beautifully within a square, which is very difficult to do. And all of that conveys so much, you know, just the boy and the shadow and the ocean, and like, that's it. And yet it does tell a story. So there are more to that, to this project, yes?
Yes, okay. Yes. And again, all of these were photographed in and around my grandfather's home. And so this is one of my uncles preparing a meal. And, you know, for every moment, it's just the beauty of the light that was what really struck me. This is my grandfather's home, my grandfather's room. This is actually where he slept, and by this point he had passed away as well. So I wanted to create something, create an image or capture something to honor him, and that became the moment for me.
And really, why? The bed, the pillow, or the emptiness of it, kind of?
I think it was all of those things. I think the light, the way the light hit the pillow, and just you know, just imagining his presence, but also the fact that he was no longer there. So there was something about wanting to create a moment where I could project him into that moment, because I wasn't able to be with him when he passed. So, so wanting to create something that spoke to that.
Okay, all right. And here we have
my aunt, my amazing, wonderful Aunt Jacqueline, who would speak to me every night. She and I would sit down every night, and she would just tell me all these stories about everything that she's done, and she's she's kind of the rebel of the family.
Is she? Why is that?
She never adheres to tradition, and she definitely marches to the beat of her own drum, and I think she and I definitely bond, and I definitely look to her, up to her for that.
That's a big part of your photography too, is the female empathy and the bonding.
Yeah, so it was necessary. I had to create a picture of her and create a picture that I think captured her. This is my mother and my aunt Jackie. And it's just beautiful just watching my mother and her sister.
Well, there's definitely a sense of looking at the photographs of the people bonding between them, but yet there's also kind of a distance.
And I think, just again being, wanting to be in this very intimate space with my family in Guyana, but also, being a first-generation American. I was often teased
Were you? Yeah.
for being called Yankee, or my not having a Guyanese accent. So there was a space that I occupied that was kind of marginal, but wanting to use my camera to really get closer and
to bridge the distance.
Yeah, exactly.
So that because you are the observer, and you can kind of tell that, and that is.
This is where my grandmother is buried.
It is a cemetery. Okay.
Yes, it's a cemetery, and we actually went that day to visit and leave flowers for her, and so I wanted to create an image that spoke to that space where she is now.
Is that the last one in that series that we have here?
I don't remember, to be honest.
Do you think of these projects? This one starts the...
so this is a new project where I was, again, after returning from Guyana, and this is something that has always been something I've been thinking about, is this idea of home and where home is located, and just where is that grounding for me.
Where is home located for you?
I would say, and a friend of mine actually, I think, helped me to come to this conclusion that, home is within my own body.
Home is where the heart is? What?
It's trite, but it's true. It's definitely true that it's more than geography.
Definitely.
That it's made up of so many other things in terms of, my memories are, a form of home for me, and that's something that I carry with me. So I wanted to create a series of a combination of self-portraits and objects where I'm meditating on the idea of home. And
is that you?
This is me. This is actually me. And
it's very, very yin-yang kind of photograph. And this one?
This one is me as well. It's my reflection in a mirror. I photographed a horseshoe, and this was more speaking to rituals that I was brought up with. And within my family, it was always, we always had to place a horseshoe above our front door, and it was to bring us good luck. But it was something, when I moved into my apartment, when I was actually moved into my own apartment for the first time, my mother made sure I put a horseshoe.
Actually, many cultures have the horseshoe. Yes. American culture definitely has that as well. It's a good luck symbol. So you do use symbols in that sense, or found objects. I know you have some more. It's almost a found object. What?
This is actually an old image of my father. This was actually an image of him, his first passport picture when he was 16. And it was severely damaged, and I wanted to create a picture where, just holding it, and again speaking to all the objects that represent.
What is he holding? Is that the?
That's my hand holding his picture.
Oh, his picture. Okay. So that also speaks to the memory and the transformation. And this one?
So this is another image of my dad, and it's submerged with salt. And, you know, again, and it comes up a couple of times in this particular series, just the symbolism of salt. And, you know, we were taught to, you know, my family, you know, to pour a little bit of salt at the front door to keep out, you know, bad spirits.
Right.
So all these things I wanted to photograph because it spoke to all the different ideas of what home meant for me, and just the idea of how a home is maintained. This is another self-portrait. My mother and I have the same neck. Like, I have the same wrinkles under my neck as my mom. And just wanting to create an image that, again, spoke to the commonality that I have with her and who she is to me. And again,
also the continuation through the generations. So all these pictures taken together, one really needs to see them as a collection, because the sum of all the pictures is, what is it, the whole? The sum is greater than the whole, or how does that go? The whole is greater than the sum of its parts.
Yeah.
So finally got that. So it's kind of like that each individual picture says something, but when you take them as a whole collection, it really says a lot more. This is also the salt. And, tell us about the paper airplane.
So the paper airplane is, again, pulling from memory. My dad and I, you know, my dad loved paper planes, and we would spend endless hours, and he would teach my fingers how to, you know, how to fold the papers to make it into an airplane. And so I wanted to create something that honored that memory.
Your mom, your dad, you've got everybody in there. Well, tell us a little bit in what direction you see your photography taking you. Well, I know you teach at the International Center of Photography, but perhaps and you also work with youth groups. So where do you see yourself going?
Education also is a love of mine and a passion of mine, and working with youth and using photography as a mode for youth advocacy is something that I'm deeply invested in. And so, you know, right now I'm working on a project. I just returned from Ghana, West Africa, where I was a part of a pilot project that allowed for a group of displaced youth to use photography to create their own narratives. So that's something that I've been working on and planning on going back next summer to continue the project. So making it more long-term. And also, you know, I love working at the International Center for Photography, and just the community there has always been amazing in terms of all these people who come from all over the world to practice what they love and to express themselves through such an amazing medium as photography. So just continuing in that direction, and also working on my own projects.
Well, do you feel that the playing field in photography has been leveled at all in terms of men and women?
I would love to say yes, but I can't. I still don't feel that it's completely level yet. You know, I've had experiences in my journey where I was told specifically to, you know, I had photo editors tell me that I should apply for jobs at a women's magazine, or I should apply for jobs at, you know, African American magazines, where I felt that it was insulting and marginalizing.
Yes, rather than just saying, you know, perhaps the work is not for us, go somewhere else. Yeah. Well, we'll see if we can change that in the future, hopefully. And, well, it kind of looks like we're just about run out of time.
Okay.
I would like to thank our guest, Keisha, for being with us, our sponsor, Professional Women Photographers, Manhattan Neighborhood Network, and, of course, all of you for joining us on tonight's edition of PhotoTalk. See you next time.